Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2025 RSM Initial Research Show. We've done it. We've reached the final week of the PGA Tour for the 2025 calendar year. I know the Grant Thornton will happen either next week or in 2 weeks, but I don't do anything for that as it is, a very, very limited field with the LPGA and such. So at least for Calls, this is the end of the 2025 year. Hopefully we've made it a very good one. I've had several outrights this year, some pretty good weeks. Was very, very close at the Bermuda with 100-1 Chandler Phillips. Could not get the job done on the 72nd hole. Did not have a lot of Adam Schenk, or any Adam Schenk to be honest, in DFS. So I hope you had a lot of success for the Bermuda Championship. What'd you think? Did the wind factor in as much as you thought it would? Minus 12. The winning score. A very, very difficult week. So did have a lot of things correct, just not enough to make it a profitable week. So we're going to try to finish off 2025 with a solid week as we look to 2026. But we're here for the RSM, so let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where in 2026, or coming back in 2026, I'll post research every Monday regarding some course info, patterns of previous winners, players in the field who fit those patterns. Don't do a lot of that for the fall, considering these events are very, very inconsistent, if not just brand new, like the Bay Current was earlier in the fall. But normally, on Mondays, if you want to see the weekly research that I do for the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contest I play. That comes out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see the players I'm wagering with my own money, the players I'm using most often in my lineups, give me a follow over at X. And lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle's in the description. He writes a great article called The Fringe. I can't recommend it enough. He's making a lot of enhancements and updates to that over the fall portion of the PGA Tour schedule, so he doesn't do anything for the fall. But by subscribing to his article, you're going to get his deluxe version, which comes out every Wednesday. Has his projected ownerships, favorite plays, top values, and things of that nature. You really are missing out if you aren't subscribed to his article. So make sure you're doing that, and go follow him over on social media. Show him some support. Then lastly, for this intro, we are live. Chat's open. Want to hear from you all. How was your Bermuda? Did you have Adam Schenk? Did you play a lot of Adam Schenk in your DFS lineups? I want to hear about any success that you've had, that you had regarding the Bermuda Championship moving forward for the RSM. What do you know of the courses? I said courses because this is a rotational course or setup here at Sea Island. What do you know of the courses? Who do you think your favorite is beginning at the beginning of the week this week? So anything RSM, feel free to put your thoughts and opinions into the chat. I'll get to those. And then if you're not able to catch the show live, put your thoughts and opinions into the comments. I'll always get to those as well. So let's get into it. Let's do our initial research for the 2025 RSM Classic. And we're going to start, thankfully, which seems like it hasn't happened in a little while, we're going to start with the actual this year's tournament fact sheet. We are in St. Simons Island, Georgia for the RSM Classic at Sea Island Resort. I mentioned that this is a rotational course. That's probably not the best way to phrase that. There are two courses that are played in the cut portion of the tournament, much like Torrey Pines and the Farmers. You have Torrey Pines North and Torrey Pines South. Here you have Seaside and Plantation. So players will play one round each on the Seaside course, and on the Plantation course, top 65 scores and ties will move to the Seaside course for the weekend. Plantation is not used on the weekend. Again, very similar in structure to the Farmers, where they use Torrey Pines South on the weekend. So Sea Island Resort, the main course is Seaside. That is where most of our, if not all of our research is going to be. And much like the Farmers and Torrey Pines, the off course is easier. Generally, that is where a lot of your scores are going to be made for the week. This course sits on the coast in St. Simon's Island, but the Plantation course sits more inland, so it is not as affected by wind. So another one of these tournaments that, like the Bermuda, can have drastic ranges in terms of difficult or difficulty in how it plays. The Seaside course is a Harry Colt and Charles Allison design, renovated by Tom Fazio in 1999. There were several fairway bunkers that were renovated, and then not of note for this year, but next year, you see that the fairways are going to be regrassed to paspalum. We've had a lot of paspalum here recently with the Worldwide Technologies, a little bit with Bermuda in terms of fairways. Boy, I lost my train of thought there. We've had a little bit of paspalum here lately. Paspalum is known to be a grass that thrives in warmer climates. So the fairways are going to change from Bermuda to paspalum. But these greens are Tiff Eagle Bermuda, just like we had last week at the Bermuda Championship. The Seaside course in of itself is a traditional par 70, 4 par 3s, 2 par 5s, and I'm going to have to cheat and make sure that is correct. 1 par 5 there, 1 par 5 there. A traditional par 70, only 2 par 5s, that measures right at 7,000 yards, so not as short of a course as Port Royal is in Bermuda, but we are still looking at a very short course. As I mentioned, we are on Tiff Eagle Bermuda. We looked at this last week. We'll look again this week at putting on Tiff Eagle Bermuda with the Plantation course at Kapalua, here, Port Royal, a couple others that are escaping me. PJ National. I'm going to go ahead and get my notes out here. There's one more that Bay Hill. That's right. The rest of the course has quite a bit of Bermuda with ryegrass overseed. You see the rough only 2 inches long. It is not difficult to play out of. The main defense of this course, being on the coast, is the wind. You do have a little bit of some winding through tree-lined fairways and whatnot, particularly on the front nine, but the back nine is pretty exposed. The greens here, fairly large, 7,200 square feet. Average on the PGA Tour is about 6,000 square feet. So these are large greens. Here at the Seaside course specifically, not a whole lot of fairway. These fairways are pretty darn narrow, and especially for a short course, they're pretty narrow. 13 holes with water in play. You would expect that being on the coast. And it says average fairway width of 47 yards. I don't believe that. It's what it is saying. I do feel like they play quite a bit narrower than what that listed yardage is in terms of fairway width, because 47 yards would be pretty darn forgiving, pretty darn wide, and I don't recall these fairways being that forgiving, but we'll also get into that into the course breakdown as well. So there's a look at the Seaside course. We'll take a quick look at the Plantation course, most recently renovated by Davis Love III. He is the kind of the host of the tournament here at the RSM. And his renovations included changing the greens from paspalum to this same Tiff Eagle Bermuda. So that was a lot of the challenge when you were handicapping this tournament, in the sense that the Plantation course was quite a bit different than the Seaside, the main course. Now it's a lot more similar. The Plantation course is, however, a traditional par 72 with 4 par 3s and 4 par 5s, but roughly the same yardage, still under 7,100 yards. So you have several short par 5s and par 4s on the Plantation course, as you can probably imagine. Much easier scoring opportunities over the Plantation course. They are also TIF Eagle Bermuda, so we can just take a look at putting in its totality for the tournament. These greens, however, much closer to average in terms of size at 6,100 square feet, 10 holes with water in play, and these fairways average 43 yards in length. So Plantation course much easier than the Seaside course. So that is something that we'll have to take a look at, particularly starting tomorrow in Wind Finder, is if there is a day where the wind really picks up, then you're going to want to have your players on the Seaside course, honestly, which sounds counterintuitive, but you want your players in the calmest of weather on the Plantation course to really take advantage of the Plantation course, because the Seaside course is difficult. Maybe not difficult. It is rarely easy. It is generally pretty average in terms of difficulty, and it gets very difficult in the wind. So everyone's going to struggle at the Seaside course. So if we have a day where the wind is quite a bit lower in terms of strength, then we're going to want to target the players that are playing the Plantation course on that less windy day. But there's a look at the two courses, mostly the Seaside course here at Sea Island Resort. We'll close that out and we'll move to Fantasy National and the players in the field this week for the RSM. Your defending champion actually is not playing this year. Your defending champion is Maverick McNeely. He has decided not to play. And then don't mind me as I am starring the players that are alternates. One player has withdrawn over the weekend that originally committed to playing the RSM and is not going to. That is Matt McCarty. So any player starred is not in the field as of right now. Matt McCarty is fully withdrawn from the field, and the rest of these players are alternates at the moment. Dylan Fratelli has taken Matt McCarty's spot. But your defending champion not here, not playing this year, which is a little bit surprising. Most of the time you'll get your defending champion returning to a tournament. But even with that, field is fairly strong, and that's what you'll get at the RSM. By no means is it major quality or even something like the players or things of that nature. But in relation to all of these other fall events, you generally get pretty strong fields for the RSM. Players like Daniel Berger are here. Let's see, Eric Cole. Trying to scroll down here, Harris English. You'll get a lot of your guys that are Georgia residents that make their home on St. Simon's Island or somewhat close, and that contingent generally is pretty strong. Harris English, Brian Harmon, players of that nature. Zach Johnson has always been pretty good here, even though he's not the biggest name anymore. So yeah, there's a look at a few of the players in the field this week. I'll sort on strokes gained total, how players have performed recently. Good evening, Phil. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. 1 week late on Sapan. What did he end up finishing? I know he played pretty darn well in Bermuda. But tied for third. Yeah, so he was pretty solid all 4 days, especially on the first day. I got to be honest with you, I was really pulling for Chandler Phillips, considering I had the outright on him at 100-1. But considering you've been talking about Sapan for the past 2 or 3 events, I got to tip my cap to you. But hopefully you had a fairly successful Bermuda. I know you were pretty high on Pearson Cootie, who played pretty darn well, all things considered. I believe he still finished inside the top 25. So hopefully you had some success at the Bermuda, at least much more than I did. It wasn't a disaster of a week by any means for me, but when you have 80+% of Patrick Rogers and he misses the cut, you're fighting an uphill battle from there. So I was pretty much all in on that Chandler Phillips outright that just couldn't quite get across the finish line. Woman at work is Phillips' aunt. She was rooting for him too. I mean, I was much more selfishly rooting for him in terms of it being completely monetary. But he played well. I had a strong feeling about Chandler Phillips all week. I wish I would have stuck to my gut feeling on him and played him more in DFS. But such is life. And we're going to move to the RSM, the final event on the PGA Tour for 2025. You got about 20% of your investment back. That's about where I was. I think I was somewhere between, a third. I did a little bit better than a third of my investment back. I was in between, a third and a half. So, I mean, it wasn't a good week, but it wasn't a disaster of a week. I just had a bunch of 5 of 6 lineups thanks to Patrick Rogers. And then I had a couple of, decently performing 4 of 6s that min cashed. Not a disaster of a week, but definitely going to try and finish 2025 strong with the RSM. Your top performers in the field this week at the RSM: Lanto Griffin, Rikuya Hoshino, Gordon Sargent, Camilo Villegas, Cameron Champ, Michael Thorbjornsen, Harris English, Chris Kirk, Kevin Yu, and Victor Peri. Again, note that Matt McCarty is starred. He has already withdrawn from the field. So, again, like I was saying, a stronger field than what you'll normally get for these fall events. Harris English, Chris Kirk, players, Brian Harmon, Siwoo Kim, JT Poston, Ben On. You get some bigger names for the RSM as opposed to, a very, very weak field like we just got in Bermuda. So, one thing that we can do absolutely in terms of some filters to look at, both courses here, Seaside and Plantation, are short, less than 7,100 yards, both of them. So we'll include 2024 just to make sure we have enough rounds to make it statistically significant. Eric Cole plays a lot of short courses, but just making enough rounds to make it statistically significant. Your top performers in the field this week on short courses, going back to the beginning of last year: JT Poston, Keith Mitchell, Mark Hubbard, Austin Eckroat, Patrick Fishburne, Tom Hoagie, Brian Harmon, Eric Cole, Ryo Hitsatsune, and Denny McCarthy. I want to save difficulty before we look, or until after we look at the course breakdown. Nothing to do with Architect. This is a Tom Fazio redesign, at least the main course, so nothing there. My guess is we're probably going to be looking at moderate and windy conditions, but we'll start looking at the forecast tomorrow. So with that, let's go ahead and bring us back into 2025, and we'll go to the course breakdown here in Fantasy National. Should I go back to Cameron Champ? He killed you last week. Bermuda is not a very good fit for Cameron Champ. Cameron Champ needs courses that he can really take advantage with his length, and Port Royal is just not that course. You don't hit a lot of drivers at Port Royal. Sea Island, we'll get into it. I don't feel great about Cameron Champ this week, just in terms of the idea of the course fit. And of course we'll go look at how he's historically performed here. I don't think it's all that great. Sea Island, and understand we're going to be mostly looking at the Seaside course, because that is the course that's going to be played on the weekend for anybody who makes the cut. only one round will be played on the plantation for everybody. So we're going to focus on the Seaside course. Seaside course can get difficult at times. It can also play fairly easy. You see that with the back 9 par 5, playing more than a half a shot under par, yields an eagle 4.5% of the time. I mean, a very, very easy hole. But the other par 5 on the front, doesn't yield a whole lot of eagles, less than 1%. It does still play a quarter of a shot under par. It is still, fairly easy, but quite a bit of a discrepancy in terms of how easy these par 5s are. You also have a very short, not drivable, but short par 4 here on the par 4 8th. But you have some holes that'll come up and bite you as well. Par 4 14th, only a 10th over par, but you got a lot of holes here that birdie is just not. A birdie would be a great score, and bogeys aren't necessarily all that uncommon. Again, another short par 4, but positional, plays to a 10th of a shot over par, 10th of a shot over par, 500ths. So there's not a whole lot of birdies to be had on the Seaside course, other than your one shorter par 4 and your 2 par 5s. Basically, it's a par battle. Can you get your pars around Seaside, and then really take advantage of the plantation course? This is one of the tournaments with 2 courses. There's a few like that. I akin it, at least in structure, obviously not course-wise, because these are very short and Torrey Pines is very long, but think tournament structure-wise like the Farmers, where players will play Torrey Pines North and Torrey Pines South one day each on the cut, and then they move to Torrey Pines South fully for the weekend. It's very similar here. Players will play the plantation course and the Seaside course during the cut portion, and then move to the Seaside course for the entirety of the weekend. Some other things to note here for the Seaside course: the par 3s, a good mix here, but they're pretty long. 204, plays to a 10th of a shot over par. The easiest par 3, actually one of the easier holes on the course, plays to a 10th of a shot under par. And then the back 9 par 3s, 223 and 192. So good mix of par 3s here, both in terms of length and in difficulty. Plantation played, yes, you're right. The Plantation plays very, very much easier for a couple of different reasons. Mostly is that it is a par 72 at roughly the same length. The Plantation course is about 50 yards longer than the Seaside course, but Plantation has 4 par 5s. Seaside, as you see here, only has 2 par 5s, so much more of a scoring opportunity. And Plantation course is more inland, so it's more protected from the winds that really pick up or can pick up. And Seaside, as the name would suggest, is much more exposed to the wind. So one good thing, at least for me as a statistician, we're back on American soil, so we're going to get some shot link data. Your strokes gained by shot type per round, this is a lot of putting, especially since these greens are large. They're fairly easy to hit. This does turn into a putting contest a lot of times, even though it doesn't necessarily play easy. It's just the fact that players are hitting these greens often enough that it just kind of turns into a putting contest. You can see that for your top 10s here. Off the tee does outweigh around the green quite a bit. Again, greens are easy. Around the green's not going to be as important. For your top 5s, much more the same. And then for your winners, they're just putting the daylights out. My guess is the around the green catches up to the off the tee for your winners for the par 5s. That is my guess. But it's very clearly putting is the name of the game here. And that's why we're going to have quite a bit of emphasis on how players perform on TIFF Eagle, Bermuda. Moving into strokes gained by hole by par. With only 2 par 5s, there's not a lot of par 5s to take advantage of. So players are going to have to take advantage of a lot of par 4s, and you see that there. Moving up to your top 5s, much the same. And then for your winners, there's 12 par 4s. You're going to have good par 4 scoring this week if you want to contend at the RSM. Moving to hole composition, I was talking about the par 3s. 2 under 200, 2 over 200, a good mix of range and difficulty. You do have 1 short, not drivable, but short par 4 at 368. Again, not drivable, only a 0.1% eagle rate, but a good scoring opportunity nonetheless. But 9 of the 12, 75% of the par 4s fall from 400 to 450. So you can imagine just the level of emphasis we're going to have throughout the week on players playing these lengths of holes very well. And then you have 2 longer par 4s between 450 and 500. Both par 5s at the Seaside course from 550 to 600. Approach shot distribution, not necessarily a wedge fest. This is just shorter irons. You do have some holes where you are forced to lay up or it's positional. So again, like Bermuda, like the Sony, places of that nature, like PGA National, where PGA National really forces you to lay up. You still get a bunch of 175 to 200 there. You still have the opportunity to hit driver if you really want to be aggressive, but the more prudent play is to lay back with 3-woods or irons and leave yourself some mid-length approaches in. So at least early on this week, we're going to focus on the 125 to 175 range, as you can see there. Historic cut line is kind of all over the map. It really does depend on the wind. It's been as high as +2, which is very difficult. But it hasn't been under par, it hasn't been over par in a decade. It's been as low as -7 when winds are really, really calm. Even the Seaside can give up a few birdies, but a lot of that's from the Plantation course. Generally, you're looking at -5. The Plantation course is just simply that easy. Last year it did get to -2, which I would guess, it says even the Plantation course got very windy, but it still played to easy. But you see, with the wind picked up, the Seaside course played very difficult. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag here. I would still say probably 4 to 5 under is about what's expected, which would put it to easy. But you got to understand the Plantation course is just much simpler and much more scoreable than the Seaside course. You going back to Rogers, T17, I don't know. I don't have strong leans this week, at least not early. A lot of it will come in this here. I want to see the players who have played well previously, but I don't have any strong leans this week, and I haven't looked at the forecast. That was one thing that I was very, very confident in last week, is that the wind was going to play a big factor at Bermuda. It generally does. The RSM is kind of a mixed bag, so I'll really start kind of honing in tomorrow when I look at my first look at the forecast and things of that nature. So I hate to give you a non-answer like that. I just simply don't know, Phil. Scoring distribution, not very, very few eagles around here, but you do have quite a few birdie opportunities. But it's mostly pars. Can you get your pars around Seaside? Now, if we were to look at the Plantation course, Plantation is much more different. Very, very much, 23% birdies. Just very, very easy. Very easy here. So, you got quarter of a shot, 4/10, almost a half a shot. Only one hole, 2 holes really that challenge you. So the Plantation course is very, very gettable. They play Seaside. No. So they play Seaside for second round, or for 2 rounds, yes. So the entirety of the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, will be played on Seaside. Then Thursday and Friday will be alternating Seaside and Plantation. So if a player will play Seaside on Thursday, they'll play Plantation Friday. If they make the cut, it's Seaside. They only use the Plantation course for the cut portion of the tournament. Let's see. Other things of note here for Seaside driving accuracy. Again, this is a very, to me, misleading. These fairways aren't that forgiving. This is a lot of players clubbing down, 3 woods and irons off tees. But you have to be in the fairway to give yourself a chance. And you can see that with driving distance. I mean, it's quite a bit less than the average tour event. So players are clubbing down to find the fairway. I just don't want you to get the visual that these fairways are wide and generous. They are not. But players are just clubbing down to make sure they're in them. Green and regulation percentage, these greens are very large and they are pretty darn easy to hit. Despite the fact that the course sits on the coast, these greens are usually pretty receptive. They've been soft. We don't have the reading from last year, but they've been soft. So they're very, very receptive, despite the fact that they are on the coast. So hitting the green is pretty darn easy. That's why it turns into a putting contest a lot of times. Scrambling at Seaside, easier than the average tour event. 3 putts per round are a little bit higher as well. That's mainly just due to the fact of the size of the greens, would be my guess. And then distance, we talked about much less here. And again, proximity, much less here, even though with the size of the greens, proximity is less here because you have a lot of shorter clubs in hand. There's a look at Sea Island from a scorecard and graphical view. We'll take a look at the historic conditions just really quick. Last year, you had average for day 1. Plantation was easy day 2, even though it was windy. It was difficult at Seaside. Seaside surprisingly played pretty easy over the weekend. But it can get pretty difficult when the wind really picks up. It can get pretty darn difficult. So I don't feel comfortable looking at easy or difficult, especially since I haven't looked at the forecast yet. We already looked at short courses. Don't know about the wind yet. So let's just go ahead and jump into some of these strokes gained metrics that we can look at for the RSM. We will start with a little bit of off the tee. I don't think this is going to be an important factor this week. We saw, players are clubbing down, finding fairways. So I don't think this is going to be very important this week. But your top off the tee players in the field at the RSM this week: Rico Hoey, Kevin Yu, Pearson Coody, Jake Knapp, Cameron Champ, Jesper Svensson, Nicholas Norgard, Trevor Cohn, Daniel Berger, and David Ford. Gonna put a decent amount of emphasis in the irons here. Ben Coles, Rico Hoey, not Ricky, Rico Hoey, Michael Thorbjornsen, Chris Kirk, Victor Perry, Daniel Berger, Doug Gim, Ryan Gerard, Mac Meisner, and Doc Redman. But the most important thing, very clearly, is putting. Got to have guys that go at least 5 under on Plantation. So, we'll have probably a little bit of some par 5 scoring just for the Plantation. But I don't want to overweight the Plantation course because you're only seeing it one day. That is generally my thought process. You really kind of want to focus on the guys that are going to hold their own on Seaside. Because if you shoot, 8 or 9 under on Plantation, that's great. But it doesn't mean a whole lot if you're giving 4 or 5 shots back on Seaside. So I generally focus on the tougher golf course or the main golf course when on these rotational style tournaments. We're going to take a look at some putting, and just like last week, we're going to look at TIFF Eagle Bermuda. That is the surface here at the RSM. So we're going to start with Bay Hill, come all the way down to PGA National, the Plantation course. I will click Port Royal. As we saw last week, you don't get any statistics from Port Royal, but I'll still click on it. And then lastly, we're looking at Sea Island Seaside. The Plantation course, when did that change? You know what? Well, it's much like Port Royal. We don't get shot link over there either. But I'll click on the Plantation course. Your top putters in the field this week on TIFF Eagle Bermuda. Going back to the beginning of 2022. In fact, let me make sure I get all rounds in here just to make sure I'm not skipping over some things, because you see some players have quite a bit. Your top putters on TIFF Eagle Bermuda: Taylor Montgomery, Nico Echeverria, Mackenzie Hughes, Chesson Hadley, Anders Albertson, Bo Hostler, Sam Ryder, Paul Peterson, Eric Cole, and Jesper Svensson. Still no data even for the Worldwide Technologies, let alone Bermuda. So just be aware of that. There's your top putters. Give these players, pretty considerable boost, considering how much putting is important here. Players like Mackenzie Hughes, who we'll talk about quite a bit tonight, probably, especially when we go to the tournament history. Players like Denny McCarthy, these traditionally just very good putters. Eric Cole is pretty darn good on TIFF Eagle Bermuda. Been putting well lately as well. These guys that are generally pretty darn good putters, you're going to want to elevate them quite a bit. They generally perform well here. We'll take a look at a couple of different things here. Let's go proximity, and again we'll sort on total procs, but we're mainly looking at these two here, this 125 to 175 range. Let's put this in 2025, and then last 36, and then sort on total procs. So these two ranges here, somebody like Tom Hoagie kind of stands out. Davis Thompson really stands out first and fourth in the two most important ranges around Seaside. Henrik Norlander, Sammy Valimaki, 8th and 24th. Scrolling on down here, maybe a little bit lesser in extent, Lee Hodges, 37th and 2nd. Camilo Villegas has been okay. David Skins, maybe. See anyone else really stand out? You'll get a lot of things like first and 147th, like Seamus Power. Anybody else down here? Not really. So there's a couple of names there to kind of key in on early this week, perhaps, especially with the proximities, particularly Davis Thompson, 1st and 4th. Norlander, pretty darn solid. Tom Hoagie, solid. So there's a couple names there. And then last thing we'll take a look at tonight in terms of initial research. Let's just take a look at and see who has played these short par 4s well. 400 to 450. Again, reminder, 75%, 9 of the 12 par 4s at Seaside fall to this range. So it's going to be imperative that players play this range of par 4s well. This entire calendar year, players who have played this length of par 4 the best: Matt Wallace, Patrick Fishburne, Victor Perry, Mark Hubbard, Jesper Svensson, Noah Goodwin, Trey Mullinex, Denny McCarthy, Taylor Montgomery, Keith Mitchell, and Davis Riley. All right, with that, we'll move to the tournament history or strokes gained total tab. Players who have played the best around Sea Island in the RSM Classic the last 5 years. You see your strokes gained total leader by a fairly wide margin is Mackenzie Hughes, but he has been pretty all or nothing. 2 runner-ups, a top 5, and 2 missed cuts. So the epitome of boom or bust for Mackenzie Hughes. And if we click and take a look at Mackenzie Hughes, my guess is a lot of this either has to do with the putter or the irons, would be my guess. So RSM, so like he's never been great off the tee, and he overcomes a horrible week last year at the RSM with very solid irons and good putting. Very good putting to finish second there. He's much more field average and misses the cut. His irons carried him in 2021. He is a former winner of this event, all the way down here. Wins in 2016 on the back of strong putting and some around the green. So Mackenzie Hughes is your strokes gained total leader by quite a margin there. Some other players, Eric Cole has played very well here. Top 15 in the top 5 the past 2 years. Adams Vinson, winner in 2022. Calendar year 2022. PGA Tour season 2023. But he's got a top 5 as well. Denny McCarthy's performed well here with a top 5 and a top 10. Seamus Power's been good here. 2 top 5s. Did withdraw last year, but tournaments he's completed, he's been good. Some other notables here. Austin Eckroat, very solid in 2 tries. Taylor Montgomery's been good here in his last 3 tries. Zach Johnson has missed the cut the last 3 years, but he was very, very good in the early 2010s and late 2000s. Someone who was very synonymous with Sea Island. So we'll see if he can recreate some of that magic. Brian Harmon's got a runner-up. He's been okay here. Robert Streb, 2-time winner here at the RSM. Thorbjornsen finished top 10 last year in his only try. Berger and Luke Clanton, each runner-up. I don't remember Luke Clanton's runner-up. I do remember Berger's. But I do not remember the runner-up from Luke Clanton last year. But, there it is. McNeely wins by 1 over Berger, Clanton, and Nico Echeverria. Mackenzie Hughes, Hodges, Poston. Poston's probably been pretty good here, would be my guess. Just because you asked, we'll check Cameron Champ. As I thought, Phil, not a lot to go on there. This is not a good fit for Cameron Champ. You don't use driver here, and that is his biggest weapon. You also asked about like Patrick Rogers. He's been solid here, I suppose. Didn't miss the cut. Pretty terrible finish in 2021, but then a top 10 in the top 20. So Rogers has been okay. Nothing, stand out, but he's been okay. Other side of the spectrum, players who have not performed well at the RSM. You see Dylan Fratelli, 0 for 5. Austin Cook, 0 for 5. Despite the fact that Davis Thompson was extraordinary at the proximities. He has been really bad at the RSM. So my guess is that's probably a lot to do with putting. Yep. So, he's only gained once in his 6 tries here at the RSM. Because his irons have been, hit and miss. But he is just not putt well at all here at the RSM. So, leaves a lot to be desired there. You got a feeling you're going all in on Knapp. You got a feeling. Knapp made the cut here last year. Didn't perform all that well over the weekend, it looks like. So, if you have a gut feeling, I'm not going to be one to try to talk you off of it. I don't know. I don't have a strong feeling for or against Jake Knapp. Other players here who have not played well. Troy Merritt, only 1 for 5. Tournament host Davis Love III. Brian Stewart. Let's try to get some notables here. Matt Wallace. Matt Wallace has struggled at the RSM. Chad Ramey 0 for 3. Justin Lauer 0 for 4. He was somebody that I was quite disappointed in last week. Your guy for the past couple weeks, Phil Pearson Cootie, 0 for 1. Really struggled last year. Campos. Some others here. Jacob Bridgman 1 for 2. Sam Ryder has a top 15, but missed cuts everywhere else. Siwoo has not been good here. Kisner, not the greatest here. Does have a runner-up a few years back, but has, kind of really struggled as he's gotten older. Streelman, not great. Sam Stevens, not great. Davis Riley, Mark Hubbard, all these players are still negative in terms of strokes gained. So there's a look at the players who have and have not played well at the RSM. That's what I have for you all in terms of an initial research show. Thanks to Phil for jumping in chat. Very much appreciated. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel, liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. Always appreciate it. Going all people plantation first if it's good weather. Playing seaside on a bad day could be bad. You and I have a different feeling on that. If the wind, if there's a clear good weather day and a clear bad weather day, I would much rather have my players play their bad weather day on the seaside. Because seaside is pretty difficult regardless. You want to make sure your players are able to take advantage of the plantation course. And the easier that is, the more likely they're going to go low. If we look at like these historic conditions here, plantation, moderate, average. I don't know what is going on with this, but it was windy and easy in round 2. Probably not going to get wind metrics for many of these. Yeah, this is all seaside, so seaside. Plantation, windy and difficult, moderate and easy. So you and I probably going to have a different approach to that. I would much rather have my guys play the easier course on the better day to make sure they're able to take advantage of that easy course, because we've seen the plantation course play a little difficult if the wind really, really picks up. So, and that's the course you really have to take advantage of. And of course, we'll look at this. We'll look in the weather starting tomorrow. We always start the show on Monday looking at the weather, and we also start the show on Wednesday looking at the weather. So we'll see if something develops. This might all be for naught. But it's good to think about, considering we have a 2-course rota and things aren't always uniform in these style of tournaments. But thanks again, Phil, for jumping in chat. Thanks again to everyone else for all the support, for all the wagers you made this past week at the Bermuda Championship, for all the DFS contests you played this past week at the Bermuda Championship. And until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.